Reset imminent. Global currency collapse. End of US dollar. Let's begin with some background. Gold backing of the US dollar was dropped in the 1970s by Nixon. The US fiat dollar is a bonanza to our nation under the petrodollar scheme because countries are forced to use US dollars for international payments. The Chinese yuan has been added to the world currency reserve basket by the IMF. The alternative to the US dollar is nearly here. It has been revealed that the new world currency is to be backed in gold. It's also noted that Iran ends petro trading in US dollars. BRICS bank to start borrowing in yuan and will stop borrowing in US dollars, and hence, power will shift from US to China. The nations comprising the BRICS have made major anti-US dollar announcements. China is producing the most gold of any country and keeping it all inside their borders. They are also buying up gold mines worldwide, and acquiring gold from Western markets at an unprecedented pace. China intends to back its currency with gold. 23 countries have set up swap lines and have left the US currency, putting a nail in the US dollar's coffin. The swap lines allow these countries to bypass the US dollar as the world's exchange medium. China and Russia are celebrating the coming end of the US dollar. Why is the US so aloof about its gold supply? Why does the US refuse to return Germany's gold, or even to inspect it, if it's stored at Fort Knox? Consequently, it's not surprising that Germany intends to ditch the US dollar and join the BRICS bank. The alternative to the US dollar is nearly here. It has been revealed that the new world currency is to be backed in gold. The old world order, where the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, is falling apart. The currency reset will be followed by economic reboot and restructured financial markets. The AIIB, the bank sponsored by China, will supersede the IMF, beholden to the USA. The gold-backed yuan will replace fiat currencies like the US dollar. 57 nations headed by Russia and China have agreed to end the US dollar monopoly as the world's reserve currency. Together, these 57 nations account for 62% of world GDP. The effort to displace the US dollar is being done in phases. Early phases included, 1. The accumulation of gold, which will serve to back the yuan. 2. Getting Chinese currency added to the world reserve currency basket. 3. Establishing the China Gold Exchange to rival the COMEX controlled by the West. 4. Expanding China's bond market in order to develop a rival to the US Treasury market. And 5. Building up military strength with Russia and China as the key worldwide enforcers. The final phases involve the en masse dumping of US treasuries and US dollars, which will no longer be required for international payments. In short, the end of the petrodollar currency scheme, which allows the US to print money with impunity, will cause the dollar to collapse. The world's richest people are buying gold and silver before economic collapse. This investment strategy suggests that smart investors believe the US dollar will weaken, or worse, collapse. Goldman Sachs and JPM Bank have been large short sellers in gold until recently. However, their recent effort to short and suppress gold prices again failed, as the market went against them. So they threw in the towel and are now bullish on gold. The global oil market has slipped from America's control. Saudi Arabia is going to end the petrodollar. The Saudis have threatened to dump US treasuries. Massive US debt and printing of trillions of US dollars has diluted Saudi's power and ability to maintain the petrodollar. Regarding the G20 Shanghai Accord, was there a secret deal? But both the Chinese and IMF deny having such an agreement. If this is true, why have the meeting? A G7 leader warns that global economic collapse is coming. The supposed good economy highlighted by Obama is actually all smoke and mirrors. There are serious problems in the United States. $9 trillion are missing from the Federal Reserve, which cannot be accounted for. US citizens are being tracked all over the world because the US government taxes its citizens across borders, and thereby, supersedes worldwide laws. This angers foreign countries because the US is the only major nation to do this. The US gets away with it by bullying other nations. By losing its role as the world's reserve currency, when the US prints money again, QE4, foreigners won't accept this printed fiat money. And, when this happens, how can the US trade with other nations when the currency is worthless? Personal tax receipts implode, confirming that the economic collapse is accelerating. An early warning indicator is when temporary worker employment peaks and begins falling. This indicator has precisely called the last two recessions. Growth is essentially non-existent. And, the stock market is overvalued by any measure. Alan Greenspan, former Federal Reserve Chairman, has said the U.S. economy has a serious shortage of finances, lacks productivity improvement, and an inability to fund Social Security. Greenspan says that the Federal Reserve is responsible for our current mess. The coming recession is not the big problem. The bigger problem is the coming depression due to no growth. It now takes $10 in debt to get a $1 economic impact from the debt. Dwindling personal tax receipts combined with the drop in temporary workers strongly suggests that the drop in government-reported unemployment is an illusion. We are on the shadow gold standard. We have just enough gold to prop up the Federal Reserve. After selling much of the gold, going from 30,000 tons to 8,000, it has held steady for decades. Given the Fed's balance sheet, the U.S. Treasury cannot sell any more gold. Glitches are occurring everywhere among banks. Bangladesh's digital wealth with the US of $101 million was cyber-looted. The Philippines and other country bank holdings have also been transferred out. Lazarus, the North Korean cyber-criminal group, appears to have broken into 4 central banks. The attacks clearly resembles the code used by North Korea to attack Sony in 2014. This means hackers have access to the global banking network, which, in turn, allows them to empty bank vaults. The most likely motive is the fact that North Korea is strapped for cash. It's important to note that all banks, central and community, are networked with SWIFT. Japan appears to be heading into a recession. Venezuelans are starving as they suffer through a depression. Greece is buckling under austerity measures, yet they have steadily found it necessary to take on greater debt. The losers in the currency war will likely be Europe and Japan. If the US dollar is devalued and China's currency is pegged to the dollar, the euro and yen will strengthen, which will hurt their economies. As the US dollar weakens, we have to pay more dollars for the same amount of imported goods, and thus, we get inflation. The end of the US dollar reserve status comes about because we can't print trillions more, so flooding the world with liquidity will be done by the IMF through SDRs. Europe and Japan have gone to negative interest rates, which means having money in the bank will cost you to keep it there. Governments around the world are steadily moving toward cashless, all digital, financial transactions as the internet now allows this. Governments are leery of moving too fast and triggering a revolt by the people. The pigs, Portugal, Italy, and Ireland, Greece, Spain, are in economic turmoil. Greece, for example, has chosen to remain in the Eurozone because of its horrendous debt burden. They required debt to make the interest payments on prior debt. The relatively well-off Germany keeps a lid on European interest rates, allowing Greece to finance its insatiable debt appetite. So, it stays in the Eurozone, even though Greece recognizes that it can never pay down its bloated debt. In a recent EU survey, 71% of respondents indicated the economic conditions in Europe are poor. This figure is in the 90s for Greece, Spain, Ireland, Hungary, and Italy. Youth unemployment is phenomenally high, about 50% in some European countries. EU manufacturing is in decline. EU is not making industrial-related investments and, generally speaking, considers manufacturing dead. Orbán, Hungarian leader, foresees the destruction of the EU. Others agree, like Soros. Derivatives have been called a weapon of mass destruction. The total derivatives market is many times the world's GDP. Such financial engineering is relied upon to eliminate risk, which is typically done through swaps. But, this is a zero-sum game, because there is always someone else taking the other side of the bet. Thus, total systematic risk is not reduced. Potential losses change hands. So when the credit market collapses, derivatives will implode, and there will be unintended consequences, as no one will really understand where the losses lie. Deutsche Bank, which is on the brink of bankruptcy, has many trillions of dollar exposure to derivatives, enough to sink Germany. It may prove to be the black swan, a Lehman Brothers type of event, that triggers a credit crisis leading to a worldwide economic collapse. Obama gives PrEP warnings. Government has begun managing food distribution, ostensibly because of the drought in California. It uses FEMA to distribute food through Walmart. Recently, Obama has warned citizens to be prepared for a disaster. But Obama's warning Americans to prep for a disaster is a new twist, given that he normally says everything is fine. His stump speeches now emphasizes lost jobs that are never coming back due to automation, like autos. Obama is getting with FEMA to get ahead of supposed disasters like a tropical storm or hurricane. But what is the real purpose of FEMA camps? They are sponsoring FEMA apps that will direct you to camps. Many believe they are, in fact, preparing for civil unrest, possibly a revolt, when the economy goes into a tailspin. By declaring martial law, the government can force relocation. FEMA has a plan for martial law. It has stockpiles of armor-piercing ammunition and thousands of gigantic plastic coffins, and truckloads of martial law signs in English. And municipal police forces have purchased a whopping array of military equipment. FEMA camps, regardless of original intent, could possibly end up being makeshift prisons, where those who are incarcerated will have limited constitutional rights. Obama recently gave a speech in which the constitutional rights involving detention, arrest, and legal rights of people charged with a crime can be taken away. In fact, he advocated that a person could actually be charged for committing a future crime. Even the liberal MSNBC and liberal civil rights groups are outraged by this, saying that no one has ever dared to go this far, which essentially eliminates some basic constitutional rights. The U.S. economy to collapse. When tech stock prices rose to ridiculous levels in 1999, the U.S. markets crashed. The economy bounced back by expansionary policies directed at the housing market. However, in 2008, the housing bubble burst, triggering a recession. But, now we have a government debt bubble, which carries far more systematic risk than the earlier two bubbles. That's because there's no way to bail out the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve Bank. Social Security is expected to run out of money in 2023. The food stamp welfare programs are unfundable at their current rate. The number of people not in the workforce continues to grow. 70% of U.S. citizens have little, if any, savings. There will be no change in Fed policy. The Federal Reserve has stated that they will continue emergency monetary policy that was started in 2008. That is, the Fed will continue to print money to buy bonds in order to continue their debt suppression scheme. They will continue to rob savers through low, even negative, interest rates. They have flipped common sense, normal monetary policy, on its head. And they don't intend to stop. So, how is the Fed going to continue its plan of printing worthless US dollars that's being rejected worldwide in order to buy up US bonds that no nation wants? The end.